So now I just want to talk about data stores, and the first bit here is stuff we've already done in the SQL injection, so this is more or less in the realm of review. So SQL, XML, and LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, are ways to access stored reservoirs of data. And all these are commonly high-value targets for attackers because they have credit card numbers, user passwords, and all sorts of good things. At least as of a few years ago, the number one vulnerability in all web apps was SQL injection, and it had been used to steal more than 90% of all the stolen data. Now, I think that is no longer true because of unsecured Amazon buckets, which in the last 3 or 4 years have just lost an incredible amount of data, although Amazon has recently tightened up their defaults, so that is becoming somewhat less common. But anyway, it's certainly one of the big ones, SQL injection. And the fundamental problem here is that you have a language that is interpreting lines of code that are created on the fly, incorporating user input. So then it's passed to some kind of parser, which tries to pick what part of it is commands and what part of it is data, and it gets confused. And a lot of languages can be run interpreted, but the most common situation is SQL. So you've already done this one where there's a ping form, and it's just supposed to be an IP address, but since it doesn't filter the user input, and since it just puts the user input right in a line that's executed at the command line, you can put a semicolon ls, and it'll execute the second command. So that's code injection. And this is the number one vulnerability in the OWASP top 10 and always has been. So if you had a compiled language, and all the code was written by the developer and then compiled into machine language, then it would be much harder to inject code. Now, we're doing it in the exploit development class. You can also inject code at the binary level, but it has to be machine code, and that's trickier. All right, so if you have a SQL command that selects star from users, where username is Marcus and password equals secret, if I put in admin apostrophe dash dash, then it will turn into this, select everything from users where username equals admin and all the rest of it is a comment, so it doesn't bother to check whether the password is correct, and it does whatever only the administrator is supposed to be able to do. So that's the kind of trick. And you can even put this in if you don't even know the name of the administrator. You can just put in the apostrophe or 1 equals 1, and now it will be where username equals blank, which is an empty string, which is probably not ever true, or 1 equals 1, which is always true, and ignore the rest. So it will just authenticate as the first user in the database, which is typically the administrator. By the way, I'll mention in practice, I find the dash dash is often not the correct comment character, and you have to use something like a pound instead. So you have to try the variations of these things. But anyway, the general technique is very good. And you can use the union command to combine two things. So you saw this. If I put in this name, Sam apostrophe union select 1, then it will terminate the string early and then take commands from me, which will add a second query to the first one. So now you get the result of the second query, selecting 1. So I mentioned there's often different comment characters required at the end other than just the dash dash. And if you're going to do a union of two tables, they have to have the same structure. They have to have the same number of fields and the same data types. Although there are some flexibility. For example, a string data type will accept a number, but a number data type will not expect a letter. So what you do is you find the number of columns. So I can do like select 1, 2 here, and then it won't take it because the first one was only going to return the name, which is 1 column, and the second one is returning 2 columns, so it will refuse to do that. So if you want to find the data type, I can add a 1, which is a number, on top of a name, and it'll take that because it regards a number as an acceptable name. Concat, yes, you can totally use concat to bypass. So if I went back here and concated 1 and 2, so it fit in one column, then it would fit in a column. Yes, a very good point. Anyway, so here's the steps you go through. First, you find the number of columns. So you select null, which will fit in any kind of column, and you do the nulls until you quit getting that error about the number of columns, and then you know how many columns you are. Then you can go back and find out an alphabetic column there. So here I can select a null, and it won't complain, but if I selected two nulls, it would complain. And now you find a string column. So if you find there's three columns, you do A null null, null A null, null null A, and see which ones of them will let you add an A, and those will be the string columns, which is what you want because a string column will let you put any kind of data into it. And after you've found it, then you can, so in here, if I find that the first column is a string, and there are three columns, and I want to know the version, then I could do this, add at version null null. Then I put whatever goodies I want in the column that I know is a string. And that's what automated tools do. So here I select add at version, and it tells me which version it's running on MySQL, which is what I'm using. By the way, I found a college vulnerable years ago. I was just Googling. If you just Google, what I did here is I heard about this on Twitter, maybe about 10 years ago, and there was a, they said look for things that have things like union and select in the URL. And there were hundreds of websites like this where there's just SQL right in the URL. So you don't even have to do SQL injection. You can just type the commands right up here. And somebody had done this, and it was saved in, this was a command that dumped the user password for a college in San Francisco. And I contacted them, but I couldn't get anybody to care. I also couldn't break this hash. I don't know what kind of hash it was. I tried a while to crack it, but I couldn't. Yeah, in URL, union plus select, something like that, yeah. And you'll find a bunch of websites that just have SQL right up here, which is, of course, an appalling practice. Anyway, and if you look at MS SQL, for example, so here's the application running as normal. If I give it a name equals Matthew, it tells me information about Matthew. So first I need to determine the number of columns. If I try to do Matthew apostrophe union select null, I get an error message, the wrong number of expressions, which makes sense because it looks like at least it's getting two fields, name and email. Now it might be fetching other things too I can't see, like some kind of user identification number, but you'd think at least two columns. So you add a second null in the same error, so you keep trying it, and it turns out you have to add 5 columns to get it to work. So apparently it's fetching 3 columns that are not directly obvious, but 2 columns I can see here. So now you verify that the first column contains a string, and it does. A null 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 gives you an A there. So now you can put whatever you want to find, table and column names. Here it's getting table name, column name, null null null. And here I'm getting table names and column names because both of these are strings. So I'm getting a nice list of all the tables and all the columns. And so now I have the goodies I want, which is probably like user's username and user's password. And so that's the game. Now I can put from users, put username and password in, and now I get everybody's username and password. So this is the process we've talked about before. But anyway, it's good to take another look at it and hopefully reinforce your understanding of it. So this is 129S, Chapter 9A. This is Chapter 8 we're done with. And here's Chapter, okay, and here's Chapter 9A. Good, and it is recording this, so I won't lose these cahoots. All right. All right, I think that might be all I'm going to get. Oh, I'll wait a few more seconds, okay? All right. All right, so what SQL method combines two queries? Oh, the lag here looks pretty short, like only 4 seconds. Better than it's ever been. Are other people having lag trouble? Looks like I'm getting enough answers anyway. Yeah, it must be pretty fast because people are answering almost getting 1,000 points. So at least some people are seeing it pretty fast. It may not be the same for everybody. That's why these are extra credit for the grading, because these Kahoots are probably not incredibly fair. Anyway. All right, what's the purpose of that injection where you select nulls? All right, yes, the point of this is to find the number of columns. You're not going to learn anything else from selecting nulls. All right, what's the free database? And MySQL, of course, which, by the way, I think has changed its name to MariaDB, but it's the same thing. All right, and if this succeeds, what have you learned? All right, the second column is a string. You can see it there. All right. All right, and I know who all these people are, so that's good. All right. So let's stop this one.